Get up, Elena. Brooke needs your seat. My husband said it in front of 10 corporate directors at the dinner celebrating his promotion to regional vice president. I had just unfolded my napkin at a long table in the ballroom of a luxury hotel in downtown Dallas. Michael did not touch my shoulder or ask me quietly. He pointed with his chin toward the smaller family table near the service doors, where his mother was already waving me over as if I had misunderstood my place. Brooke Lawson, his executive assistant, stood beside him in a champagne-colored dress that belonged at an awards ceremony, not on someone who had supposedly come only to handle logistics. Her blonde hair fell in polished waves over one shoulder. Michael's hand rested at the small of her back. I can sit somewhere else, Brooke said, touching the top of my chair. I would hate for Elena to feel uncomfortable. Her voice was sweet enough to make the insult sound like concern. Michael leaned close to me. Do not make this difficult tonight. Brooke needs to update me on the quarterly figures before my speech. And what do I need? His mouth tightened. This is work. Show me some respect. For 15 years, I had heard variations of the same command. Be understanding. Do not overreact. Do not embarrass him. Help your husband. Let him focus. Keep the house calm. Make his success easier to carry. So I stood. Michael's mother, Margaret, smiled from the family table. Brooke smiled too. Then I picked up the white place card with my name embossed in silver and tore it in half. The sound was small, no louder than a cracker breaking. But Thomas Reed, vice chair of the board at Meridian Cross Logistics, set down his coffee cup. Elena, he said, why are you standing? Michael turned. Thomas pointed to my chair. That seat was reserved for the audit committee's special advisor. I need her beside me when we discuss the Northern Division integration. The color drained from my husband's face. Brooke's fingers left my chair. Special advisor, she whispered. Another director, Linda Shaw, looked from Michael to me. Elena rebuilt the risk framework for our Midwest acquisition last quarter, she said. If she does not belong at this table, several of us probably do not either. Michael reached for my arm. I stepped away before he could touch me. For years, he had sold a convenient version of me to his colleagues. Elena, the wife who stayed home. Elena, the mother who handled school uniforms, dentist appointments, birthday cakes, and his dry cleaning. Elena, who was not really interested in corporate finance. Elena, who preferred family life because the executive world overwhelmed her. He had forgotten that before I reduced my consulting work to raise our daughter, I had been a senior risk strategist at the same company. He had forgotten who corrected his earliest presentations after midnight, who found a replacement carrier when his largest vendor collapsed, who detected a cost model error at 1:47 in the morning that would have destroyed one of his projects. Me. I placed the 2 halves of my name card beside my plate and sat down again. A server guided Brooke to a seat at the staff table near the rear wall. Michael bent toward me, keeping a smile frozen for the directors. What the hell are you doing? The better question is what you have been doing for years. Thomas opened the integration binder between us and asked me about vendor exposure in 3 distribution hubs. I answered. Linda asked about the insurance reserve. I answered that too. Within minutes, the director stopped glancing at Michael and began taking notes when I spoke. He delivered his promotion speech 40 minutes later. It was polished because I had edited 2 earlier versions before learning he planned to seat me near the kitchen. He thanked the board, his team, his mother, and Brooke for tireless operational support. He did not thank me. That omission no longer surprised anyone at the table. When dinner ended, Thomas caught up with me near the ballroom doors. I need you at headquarters at 9 tomorrow, he said. Samuel Brooks will join us. Samuel was Meridian Cross's director of internal audit. I will be there. Michael stood close enough to hear. In the car, he did not ask why the vice chair wanted me at headquarters. He waited until we reached our house in University Park, where Margaret had ridden with a cousin and arrived before us. She was standing in the living room when I entered. "You ruined my son's night," she said. "If you knew the board, why did you hide it?" I took off my coat and hung it carefully in the hall closet. "Michael is the person who tried to remove me from the board table. It was only a chair." I looked at her. It is always only something when I am the person being humiliated. Michael loosened his tie and poured himself bourbon. "You knew Thomas would recognize you. You let me look like an idiot. You did not need my help. This is not funny." "No. It stopped being funny around year 6. His phone lit on the bar. I saw Brooke's name before he turned it over. I still caught the preview. "I am so sorry. I am sure Elena did not mean to embarrass you. I can come with you to meet Thomas tomorrow." Michael locked the screen. "It is work." That phrase had become a locked door in our marriage. Whenever I asked why Brooke traveled with him to conferences where no assistant was required, it was work. When she called after 10 at night, it was work. When I found a restaurant receipt for 2 on a night he claimed to be hosting 6 clients, it was work. When she started knowing details about his mother's medication and our daughter's school calendar, it was work. I did not argue. I went to the kitchen, reheated the dinner I had prepared that morning because Margaret planned to stay with us, and opened an email I had been waiting for all day. The subject line read, "Special Review, Northern Division." The first name on the scope document was Michael Carter. There were 3 preliminary alerts: irregular vendor incentives, inflated pass-through costs, and suspicious reassignment of high-performing accounts. None of it surprised me. 2 months earlier, Thomas had asked me to review the division's risk profile because its margins looked too perfect. Meridian Cross was preparing a major integration, and the board wanted someone who understood both the operating history and the politics without reporting to Michael. I had accepted with one condition. If I found minor errors, compliance would be allowed to correct them without turning the process into a hunt against my husband. Even then, I was protecting him. I had built a career around distinguishing error from intent. People entered the wrong code. Vendors misunderstood requirements. Managers took shortcuts under pressure. Not every flaw was fraud, and not every weak control deserved a public execution. But that night, after watching Michael give my chair to Brooke and then blame me for the board's reaction, I understood something that should have been obvious. I had spent years protecting a man who no longer felt any obligation to protect me. From the living room, Michael called my name. "Elena. We need to discuss this job of yours." I closed the email and walked out. He was sitting in the leather chair I had bought him for our 10th anniversary. Margaret occupied the sofa. They looked less like a husband and mother than a panel prepared to review my behavior. "What exactly are you doing for the board?" Michael asked. "Now you want to know what I do? I am your husband. You should not hide anything that could affect my career. You have described me as a stay-at-home wife to people who worked with me. You have not held a full-time corporate role in years. That is not the same as having no expertise." Margaret sighed. "A wife should be proud to let her husband shine." I did. I just did not realize he needed me erased to do it. Michael stood. "Whatever Thomas asked you to review, you need to disclose the conflict and step away. The audit committee already reviewed the conflict. I report to them, not to you. You cannot investigate your own husband. I am advising on systems and historical controls. Internal audit owns the review." The board's counsel approved the structure. His anger shifted into fear so quickly that I almost missed it. "What have you seen?" I held his gaze. "Starting tonight, Michael, the person who should worry about your career is you." At 9 the next morning, I met Thomas and Samuel Brooks in a glass conference room on the 18th floor of Meridian Cross headquarters. Samuel had arranged 3 binders on the table. He was 52, methodical, and famous for asking the same question 4 different ways until a careless executive contradicted himself. "The board wants you formally assigned to the review," he said. "You know the account history better than anyone, and you are not in the reporting line. Michael will claim retaliation. Then we document scope, decisions, and evidence more carefully than usual," Thomas said. "Your marriage does not give him immunity, and it does not give us permission to be sloppy." The binders contained contracts with 2 restricted vendors, reimbursements labeled as market development support, and approvals missing required recertification. I recognized one vendor immediately. Hartwell Freight had been temporarily restricted after a 2019 investigation found that its rebate practices could create undisclosed conflicts. Any new incentive arrangement required legal review and annual risk recertification. Michael's division had booked $2.8 million in consulting offsets from Hartwell over 18 months. The offsets made his operating costs appear lower. Lower costs made his margins look exceptional. Exceptional margins helped win his promotion. "Who authorized these?" I asked. Samuel opened a digital approval trail. "Michael." Brooke submitted the packages. At noon, Brooke sent me a photograph. She was sitting inside Michael's car with his suit jacket around her shoulders. "It is cold in here." Michael insisted I use it. "I hope you do not misunderstand." Behind her, through the passenger window, I could see the sign for a private club in North Dallas. Michael had told me he would be at headquarters all day. I enlarged the photograph once, not because I needed to see the jacket, but because I wanted to understand why she had sent it. The image was not an apology. It was a test. She wanted to know whether I would protest, whether I would expose jealousy, whether she could make me look emotional before the audit began. I replied with one sentence. "Send the jacket to the dry cleaner." She did not write again. At 2, Samuel held the first formal review meeting. Michael entered with Brooke beside him. "She manages the files," he said before anyone asked why she was present. Samuel began with Hartwell's recertification. "The arrangement was processed by my assistant," Michael said. Brooke slid a blue folder across the table. "The supporting documents are here." I reviewed the February 1 pages. "The required vendor recertification is missing." Michael frowned. "It is in process." "Which department has it?" Silence. "Who received it?" "On what date?" "What is the tracking number?" He answered none of the questions. Brooke tried to help. "Hartwell promised to deliver the recertification after the amendment was signed." "I am asking the vice president who approved the amendment." Michael's jaw tightened. Thomas closed his notebook. A regional vice president cannot delegate accountability to an assistant. The meeting ended with requests for additional records, vendor communications, and original cost models. Michael cornered me near the elevators. "Are you trying to destroy me? When you took my seat last night, did you stop to think about what you had been destroying? Do not turn a marriage problem into a compliance case." "I did not create the approvals." "You know how aggressive the board has become. You could explain the context. Then give Samuel documents that support the context." He leaned closer. "You owe me loyalty. I gave you 15 years of it. You treated it like an unlimited line of credit." That afternoon, Margaret organized another dinner at our house to repair the celebration. She invited Michael's sister, 2 cousins, 3 longtime friends, a retired executive who had mentored him, and Brooke. Of course she invited Brooke. When I arrived, Margaret handed me a serving tray. "Help with the appetizers. Michael has important guests." Brooke sat at his right in a cream dress. Around her neck was a silk scarf I recognized immediately. Michael had returned from a conference in Denver with it 6 months earlier and said a vendor had given it to him for me. When I asked for the gift, he claimed he had misplaced it at the airport. They placed me at the far end of the table beside the kitchen door. Margaret raised her glass. To women who know how to support a successful man without competing with him. Brooke lowered her eyes with a modest smile. I only try to make Michael's life easier. I looked at the scarf, then at her. As his assistant or as his family? The dining room went still. Elena, do not start, Michael said. Last night you removed me from your table for her. Tonight your mother invited her to sit beside you and asked me to serve. I only want to understand whether you plan to give Brooke my seat or my place. Margaret struck the table with her palm. What a vulgar accusation. Brooke's eyes filled with tears almost instantly. Michael pushed back his chair. Enough. I took out my phone. You are right. Let us discuss work. I opened a recording from a vendor meeting conducted through Meridian Cross's compliance platform. Every participant had received the recording notice and clicked consent before joining. Michael's voice came through the phone speaker. The credit cannot look like a rebate. Thomas is reviewing the division. Then Brooke spoke. I can move it into consulting invoices so it does not draw attention. Her tears stopped. Michael turned toward her. Who authorized you to alter the invoices? Brooke stared at him. You did. You said to do whatever was necessary. 1 minute earlier, he had been moved by her tears. Now he was pushing her in front of the bus to save himself. I stood. Tomorrow, both of you can explain the recording to compliance. Michael grabbed my wrist. This is discussed in private. I pulled my arm free. The humiliation began in public. Consequences can survive daylight too. I picked up my bag. Where are you going? Margaret demanded. Somewhere I do not need permission to occupy a chair. Michael followed me to the front door. If you walk out, do not come back expecting me to receive you. I looked at him. My only regret is that I did not walk out sooner. I slept that night in the small apartment above my friend Marianne's bakery. Marianne had owned Sugarbird for 12 years. The apartment was meant for visiting relatives and exhausted employees who could not drive home after overnight holiday shifts. It had 1 bedroom, a narrow galley kitchen, and windows that smelled faintly of yeast and cinnamon before sunrise. She handed me clean pajamas, placed a glass of water beside the bed, and did not ask me to explain until I was ready. At 6:15, I woke to the vibration of my phone. My daughter Sophie had sent a message. Mom, sleep. I am okay. She was 14. I had stayed in my marriage partly because I believed a stable home was a gift I could give her through discipline. I absorbed Michael's dismissals, Margaret's criticism, and the constant shrinking of my own work because I thought peace inside the house mattered more than fairness inside it. Lying in a borrowed bed above a bakery, I asked myself whether I had given Sophie stability or merely taught her to watch her mother disappear quietly. I called her before school. Do you need me to pick you up? Dad says you made a scene. I challenged something publicly. That is not the same as losing control. I know. Her answer came too quickly. What did you see? I asked. She was silent. Sophie? I see how Grandma talks to you. I see how Dad acts when Brooke calls. I just thought adults had reasons they did not tell kids. The words cut deeper than Margaret's toast. Sometimes adults have reasons, I said. Sometimes we have excuses. Are you coming home? I looked at Marianne's chipped bedside table and the strip of morning light beneath the curtain. I am going to make sure we are both safe and treated fairly. I do not know yet what address that leads to. Okay. I love you. Love you too. Marianne drove me to headquarters because my hands shook whenever I imagined passing our house. Samuel had already preserved the vendor recording and suspended Brooke's access to invoice systems. The legal department issued a hold on emails, messages, cost models, and expense records related to the 2 vendors. Michael arrived with an attorney from outside the company. This review is compromised, the attorney said. Mr. Carter's estranged wife is influencing its direction after a domestic dispute. Thomas slid the engagement documents across the table. Mrs. Carter was retained 2 months before the dinner. Internal audit chose the samples. Board counsel approved her role. If your client has an objection to evidence, identify the evidence. Michael stared at me. You planned this. The board planned a review. You planned the recording. His attorney touched his sleeve, warning him to stop. Samuel asked whether Michael instructed Brooke to classify Hartwell rebates as consulting credits. No. Your voice is on the recording. The conversation has been taken out of context. Hartwell provides legitimate consulting support. Produce the consulting deliverables. Michael looked toward Brooke's empty chair. My assistant maintains those files. Your assistant's access has been suspended. The records do not disappear because she is not here. For the next 2 hours, Michael answered specific questions with general statements. Growth had been fast. Processes had lagged. Everyone understood the commercial intent. He had trusted his team. He had not reviewed every coding decision. Samuel did not raise his voice once. Did you approve the amendment? My team routed it. Did your credentials approve it? Apparently. Did you know recertification was missing? Not at the time. Then why did you tell Brooke that Thomas was reviewing the division? Michael's attorney ended the interview. Outside, Michael waited until Samuel and Thomas entered the elevator. You are enjoying this, he said. I looked at the man whose tie I had straightened before his first management interview. There is no part of this I enjoy. You humiliated Brooke in our home. She wore a scarf you bought for me while sitting in my chair beside my husband. It was a gift from a vendor. Then you violated the gift policy too. For a second, he almost smiled. He used to love when I made sharp observations. That was before every strength in me began to feel like competition. Come home, he said. We can settle this before it becomes irreversible. What would settlement mean? You resign from the review. We tell Thomas the separation created an appearance problem. Brooke apologizes. Mother apologizes. We go to counseling. And the vendor credits? Compliance can correct the coding. Without deciding whether it was deliberate? Why are you doing this to me? The question carried genuine pain. That was what made Michael dangerous. He did not think of himself as a man who harmed people. He thought of himself as the central person to whom events happened. I am not doing an audit to you, I said. I am stopping you from using me to escape one. I stayed with Marianne while my attorney, Grace Kim, filed for temporary financial protections and arranged a parenting schedule. Texas did not automatically punish a spouse for moving money, and Grace refused to promise an instant remedy. She did, however, send formal notice to preserve marital assets and requested records before Michael could rewrite the story. Michael alternated between anger and affection. On Monday, he wrote that I had poisoned Sophie against him. On Tuesday, he sent flowers to the bakery with a card, "We built too much to throw it away." On Wednesday, Margaret left a voicemail saying Brooke had been under pressure and that a mature woman would not feel threatened by a young assistant. On Thursday, Michael asked whether I remembered the cabin trip where we first discussed having a child. On Friday, he emailed Grace demanding that I return his laptop, though it belonged to the company and remained in his office. Each message required me to become a different Elena. Villain. Wife. Mother. Sentimental partner. Thief. He used whichever version might bring me back under control. 7 days after I left, Sophie arrived at the bakery carrying a worn black notebook. Marianne gave us the upstairs apartment and returned to the ovens. I found this behind a box in Dad's study, Sophie said. The notebook was mine. I had filled it during the years before Sophie was born, when I traveled between distribution centers and designed executive risk strategies. The pages contained process maps, vendor classifications, scenario trees, and notes from accounts that later became central to Michael's career. Sophie opened to a page marked with a faded blue tab. Is this the Ardent account Dad talks about? Yes. Ardent Home Systems had been Michael's breakthrough client. In every promotion interview, he described how he won the relationship through persistence and market instinct. My notebook contained the client's original risk profile, the introduction made by a former colleague of mine, and a call log showing I coordinated the March 1st meetings. Sophie turned another page. Mom, you were incredible. My throat tightened. Am I not now? You are. You just stopped talking about yourself. She did not say it as an accusation. That made it worse. I ran my hand over the handwriting of a younger woman who believed competence would always be visible if the work was good enough. She had not understood how easily unpaid support could be rewritten as a husband's talent. Why was this in Dad's study? Sophie asked. I do not know. But I did. Michael had used the notebook for years. He borrowed my frameworks, repeated my examples, and incorporated my models into presentations. At first, I helped willingly. We were a team, I told myself. When he received praise, our family benefited. When he was promoted, Sophie had security. Michael and I had met at Meridian Cross when I was 29 and he was 32. I was already leading risk reviews. He was charismatic, ambitious, and better at walking into a room of strangers than anyone I knew. In those early years, our differences felt complementary. I saw vulnerabilities in systems. He saw opportunities in people. He called me from airport gates to test ideas, and I stayed awake because I loved the sound of his mind working. When Sophie was born, Michael's travel increased at the same time my mother became ill. Full-time corporate work demanded 60-hour weeks and unpredictable trips. We decided together that I would move into project consulting for a few years. At least, I remembered deciding together. The first year, Michael still introduced me as the smartest risk person in the room. The third year, he called me our secret weapon. By the sixth, I was helping informally. By the 10th, he told new colleagues I had left because corporate pressure did not suit me. Each revision was small enough to argue about. Combined, they erased an entire career. I had challenged him once after a company picnic where he told a director I spent my days volunteering at Sophie's school. I billed 900 consulting hours last year, I said in the car. No one wants a resume at a picnic, he replied. You gave them yours. That is different. I am in leadership. At the time, I let the conversation end because Sophie sat in the back seat. That became our pattern. There was always a child, a deadline, a sick parent, a holiday, or an important meeting that made my dignity seem less urgent than peace. Sophie touched a page filled with my notes. Did Dad ask before he used these? Sometimes. And the other times? He knew I would help if he asked. That is not the same. No, it was not. My 14-year-old could see the boundary I had spent years blurring. She turned toward the apartment window. Brooke sat in the front seat when Dad picked me up from practice last month, she said. She had her shoes off and her feet on the dashboard. Dad said they came directly from a client meeting. Why didn't you tell me? I thought you knew. The answer made me close my eyes. Did anything else happen? No. She asked if I wanted help choosing a dress for the promotion dinner. Like she was part of it. I refused to ask Sophie to become an investigator inside her own family. Whatever existed between Michael and Brooke belonged to the adults who created it. You never have to collect evidence for me, I said. You can tell me when something makes you uncomfortable, but you are not responsible for proving what your father does. Are you mad at me? Never for that. She nodded, though her eyes filled with tears. I was mad at you, she admitted. Not because you left. Because you kept acting like none of it hurt. I reached across the table and took her hand. I thought hiding pain protected you. It just made me think I was imagining it. That sentence became another piece of evidence, not for the board or the court, but for me. Somewhere along the way, collaboration became extraction. He stopped mentioning my contribution. Then he stopped admitting I had ever possessed the expertise. I photographed every page and gave the notebook to Grace for safekeeping. That evening, I decided I would no longer be silent about the past simply because speaking made Michael uncomfortable. The next morning, an alert from our bank woke me at 7:12. Michael had transferred $186,000 from our joint savings account into an individual account at another bank. It was almost everything except the minimum required to keep the account open. His message arrived 4 minutes later. When your tantrum ends, you will understand that you cannot live without this family's money. I stared at the words until anger settled into clarity. Michael believed money belonged to the person willing to move it fastest. He also believed I had no financial identity because I had reduced my paid work, despite the years I managed our investments, negotiated the mortgage, funded Sophie's education account, and made consulting income the family used without ceremony. I forwarded the alert and message to Grace. "Do not engage him," she said when she called. "We will seek temporary orders, account tracing, and an injunction against further transfers. Save everything." Can he keep the money? Moving it does not automatically make it separate. But we need a judge, records, and time. I appreciated the honesty. Everyone else in my life had treated confidence as a substitute for truth. Before Grace finished explaining the filing, another email arrived. It came from Samuel. Brooke had submitted a formal statement to internal audit. She attached screenshots, vendor messages, calendar records, and a spreadsheet mapping Michael's verbal instructions to the altered invoice categories. Brooke had not suddenly become good. She was trying to save herself. Her statement admitted that she processed irregular documentation, booked personal club meetings as vendor development, and changed invoice descriptions after Michael told her delays would kill the promotion. She claimed she raised concerns 4 times. The attachments supported her. In one message, Brooke wrote, "Legal recertification still missing. Should I hold the Hartwell amendment?" Michael replied, "No holds. Book the value as consulting support and keep it off Thomas's radar until Q4. In another exchange, she asked whether the club dinner with Hartwell executives should be coded as client entertainment. Michael wrote, "Use integration planning. Elena used to clean up this language for me. You need to learn." I read that sentence twice. Even while erasing my professional history in public, he had cited my hidden labor as the standard Brooke should imitate. Samuel called. "There is more," he said. Brooke provided a private calendar showing 11 meetings with vendors that never appeared on Michael's company calendar. Several align with pricing changes. Does she mention their personal relationship? Only that Michael gave her gifts and implied her advancement depended on loyalty. Human resources will address that separately. We are focused on compliance. What happens next? The board will hold a formal review in 2 days. Michael can respond. Brooke can respond. You may present the historical account evidence because he has challenged your credibility and claimed the current results are retaliation. Samuel also sent an account assignment analysis. It showed that during the 2 years before Michael's promotion, 7 high-performing accounts had been moved into his executive portfolio within weeks of exceeding their targets. The managers who developed them retained operational responsibility but lost visibility in the reporting package. 4 of those managers were women. One was a quiet senior analyst named Priya Nair, whose work I remembered from the Midwest acquisition. Priya had built the risk controls that allowed a difficult warehouse consolidation to finish without a shutdown. Michael's promotion packet described the controls as an executive initiative he had personally sponsored and designed. I called Samuel. Did Priya know her account credit changed? She challenged it. Her performance review later said she needed to become less territorial. The phrase sounded painfully familiar. Can we interview her? Already scheduled. We will not assume motive. But the pattern is relevant. The next day, Priya joined by video with counsel present. She did not sound bitter. She sounded tired. Mr. Carter said executive visibility required simplifying ownership, she explained. He told me the project would receive more support if it appeared under his portfolio. When I objected, he said senior leaders share credit. Did he share credit with you? Samuel asked. No. Another manager described the same process. Michael arrived near the end of successful work, reassigned the account upward, and called the original owner difficult if they protested. When results weakened, responsibility moved downward again. I had believed his treatment of me grew from marriage and gender expectations inside our home. The review showed something larger. Michael did not only erase his wife. He erased anyone whose work made him look necessary, then treated their objection as a character flaw. That discovery mattered because it removed the excuse I had repeated for years: he was a good leader under extraordinary pressure who happened to be careless with me. He was consistent. I had simply been the person most trained to forgive it. After the call, I sat at Marianne's tiny kitchen table with my old notebook open in front of me. The special review had started as a question about vendor controls. It was becoming a record of how Michael built his authority: take credit upward, push responsibility downward, and label any challenge emotional. That afternoon, he called 6 times. I did not answer. Then he sent a photograph. My framed awards, professional certificates, client letters, old project files, and family albums were stacked across our dining table. Come home and fix this, he wrote. I cannot guarantee these things will remain intact if you keep attacking me. The dining table was the same place where Margaret had toasted women who did not compete with men. Now my professional past sat there like a hostage. I saved the message, sent it to Grace, Samuel, and Meridian Cross Legal, and asked for a supervised time to collect my belongings. 2 days later, I entered the boardroom wearing the white silk blouse from my first executive presentation. Michael was already seated. Brooke stood against the wall with her attorney. For the first time in our marriage, my husband looked at me as if he had finally remembered who I was. The boardroom table was dark walnut, 26 feet long, and polished so perfectly that every face appeared twice. Thomas sat at the center with 4 directors, Samuel, general counsel, and a human resources representative. Michael and his attorney occupied one side. Brooke and her attorney sat at the far end. I took the chair opposite Michael. No one asked me to move. Samuel began with the 2 vendor relationships. He presented missing recertifications, disguised rebates, altered invoice descriptions, and cost allocations that improved the Northern Division's reported margin by nearly 3 percentage points. The number sounded small. In a division with more than $400 million in annual revenue, it had shaped bonuses, forecasts, and the board's confidence. He then displayed the approval trail. Michael's credentials appeared on every material amendment. The control failures occurred during rapid growth, Michael said when invited to respond. His voice carried the calm he used in client presentations. Some administrative execution was delegated to junior personnel who did not fully understand commercial intent. Brooke lifted her head. Michael continued. I accept responsibility for not supervising every coding decision. But I did not instruct anyone to violate policy. Samuel displayed the recorded vendor call transcript. Michael's attorney objected to interpretation, not authenticity. Mr. Carter was discussing presentation, not concealment, he said. Samuel moved to Brooke's messages. Hold the amendment? She had asked. No holds. Book the value as consulting support and keep it off Thomas's radar until Q4. Michael glanced toward Brooke. She misunderstood shorthand used during a high-pressure integration. Brooke stood. No, I did not. Her attorney touched her elbow, but she kept speaking. I warned Mr. Carter in writing that legal recertification was missing. He told me not to delay anything that affected the promotion. When I asked for instructions in the system, he called me and said I should prove I was capable of handling executive work without needing every decision documented. You altered invoices, Michael said. Under your instructions. You are protecting yourself. So are you. Thomas raised one hand. This is not a debate between witnesses. Ms. Lawson, finish your statement. Brooke swallowed. Mr. Carter told me his wife had built the original vendor language and that I should use her old templates. He said Elena had no formal role anymore and would never challenge how her work was used. Michael lost the composure in his face for half a second. His attorney asked for a break. When the meeting resumed, Michael changed direction. There is a deeper conflict the board cannot ignore, he said. Elena and I are separated. She left our home after a marital dispute involving Ms. Lawson. She is using an internal review to retaliate against me personally. Thomas looked at me. You may respond. I stood. My marriage is not the subject of this review. Whether Michael crossed personal boundaries with his assistant may be relevant to human resources, but it is not why I am here. I walked to the display screen. The question before this board is narrower and more serious. Did Michael build his advancement by claiming the work of others, bypassing controls when they slowed him down, and moving blame to subordinates when the results were challenged? Michael leaned toward his attorney. I opened the first file. 2018, Ardent Home Systems. The screen showed an email sent from my Meridian Cross account before I reduced my role. I had introduced the client's chief operating officer to Michael, designed the risk assessment, and scheduled the March 1st meetings. Michael has repeatedly described Ardent as an account he won through a cold outreach strategy. The original contact and framework came from me. At the time, I did not object because we were married and I believed his success was shared. I advanced to the next file. 2020, the Pacific Carrier failure. Michael's annual review credited him with building an emergency vendor network in 72 hours. My old notebook contained the supplier matrix. Meridian Cross metadata showed my credentials made 43 verification entries while Michael attended an industry conference. I did not ask for recognition. I was home with a 9-year-old during a school closure and wanted the company to avoid a service collapse. Next file. 2022, the Denton margin error. Michael received a performance award for identifying a costing defect before quarterly reporting. The model history showed the correction came from my computer at 1:47 in the morning. An email from Michael 12 minutes later read, "Great catch. I will handle the executive summary." The executive summary named only him. I faced the board. Spouses help each other. I am not asking Meridian Cross to retroactively pay me for every conversation at our kitchen table. I am showing a pattern relevant to his credibility. When work succeeded, Michael claimed authorship. When a control failed, he blamed the person below him. When I challenged the pattern, he described me as a jealous wife. Michael stood. We were married. Of course we shared ideas. Sharing does not require erasing the contributor. You chose to step back. I chose to reduce paid hours to raise our daughter. I did not choose to surrender my name. He pointed toward the display. None of that proves the vendor coding was improper. No. Your messages prove that. I advanced to the current file. Brooke's warning and Michael's instruction filled the screen. No holds. Keep it off Thomas's radar. Brooke rose again. I also have the call log, she said. He contacted Hartwell the night after the audit interview and asked everyone to align the narrative. Samuel displayed the preserved call metadata. Michael had phoned 3 vendor executives within 25 minutes of leaving headquarters. I was clarifying commercial history, Michael said. General counsel spoke for the first time. You were under a document and communication hold. You had been told not to contact witnesses about the review without counsel. Michael's calm finally broke. He turned toward Brooke. You are going to regret this. Thomas placed his palm on the table. Enough. Silence moved through the room. I opened the photograph Michael had sent of my belongings stacked on our dining table. Beside it, I displayed his message threatening that they might not remain intact unless I came home and fixed the audit. This was sent while I served as a board-authorized advisor in an active review, I said. It followed the unilateral transfer of $186,000 from a joint marital account. I have provided the original message to company legal and my attorney. Michael went pale. I wanted my wife to come home. Then you could have invited me to talk. You threatened to destroy my past. Thomas studied him for a long moment. Since the promotion dinner, you have repeated the same pattern, he said. When Elena was your wife, you believed she did not deserve a chair. When she identified missing controls, she was emotional. When she produced evidence, she became vindictive. Did Elena Ramirez Carter, the professional, ever exist for you? Michael opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For 15 years, I had filled those silences for him. I explained his stress, softened his tone, supplied missing context, and translated arrogance into ambition. This time I said nothing. The board recessed for 50 minutes. I waited in a small conference room with Grace and Samuel. Brooke remained elsewhere with her attorney. I did not feel triumphant. My hands were cold, and I kept thinking about Sophie at school, unaware that adults were deciding whether her father still had a career. Grace watched me twist my wedding ring. You can be sad and still be right to protect yourself, she said. I helped him become this person. You helped him succeed. What he did with success was his choice. When we returned, Thomas read the decision. Michael's promotion was suspended immediately. He was placed on administrative leave pending final legal and compliance review. His incentive compensation would be examined for restatement. He was prohibited from contacting vendors, employees, or board members about the investigation except through counsel. Brooke was placed on leave while Human Resources and Compliance assessed her participation. Her cooperation would be considered, but it did not erase the documents she processed. There was no applause. I did not need any. As the elevator doors began to close, Michael ran down the corridor. Elena, wait. Grace stepped between us, but I raised my hand. What? I did not think it would end like this. Yes, you did. You only believed I would never stop covering for you. The doors closed. Meridian Cross completed its investigation 3 weeks later. The final report found serious failures of compliance, inaccurate expense classification, interference with an active review, and loss of confidence in Michael's leadership. No customer funds were stolen, and the report did not call the conduct criminal. It did conclude that he knowingly bypassed controls to preserve reported performance and attempted to influence witnesses. The company terminated his employment for cause. His promotion disappeared before it had taken effect. Several incentives remained under review. The board restated the division's margins and reassigned vendor oversight. Brooke resigned before the human resources process ended. She had participated willingly in too much to present herself as innocent. At the same time, the messages showed Michael had encouraged dependency, blurred professional and personal boundaries, and made advancement sound conditional on loyalty to him. The truth was not clean enough to turn either of them into a simple victim. I collected my belongings under a temporary agreement arranged by Grace. Michael was not home. Margaret sat on the living room sofa while a neutral property coordinator documented each box. My awards had not been damaged. Neither had the albums. The threat had been a bluff designed to force me back. That did not make it harmless. Margaret watched me wrap a framed certificate. Did you truly have to destroy your family? She asked. Did you ever ask your son that? Men make mistakes. So do women. We are simply expected to survive ours without servants. Her lips tightened. If a wife endures, a marriage survives. I placed the certificate in the box. Surviving is not always living. Sophie came downstairs carrying a canvas bag filled with my old project files. Margaret turned to her. Do not follow your mother's example. A girl should learn to hold a family together. Sophie adjusted the bag on her shoulder. I am helping my mom carry her things. The sentence was calm. Margaret had no answer for it. Sophie moved with me into a 2-bedroom apartment near White Rock Lake. Michael had regular parenting time under a temporary schedule. I did not ask Sophie to reject him. She loved her father and was angry with him, two truths that could exist together. Grace obtained temporary orders requiring disclosure of the transferred money and preventing further extraordinary withdrawals. The $186,000 remained traceable and was included in the marital property process. Michael had not made it disappear. He had only created a record of coercion. We filed for divorce. He spent the first months arguing that the company had sacrificed him to protect the board. Then he blamed Brooke. Then Thomas. Then me. Each version placed him at the center of an injustice created by someone else. During mediation, he finally said, "I understand now how much you did for me." I looked at him across the table. You do not understand it now. You lost the ability to pretend you did not know. He lowered his eyes. Was none of it real? Some of it was. That is why I stayed. But real love does not grant permanent ownership of another person's work, money, or silence. The divorce took 11 months. The settlement returned my share of the transferred funds, divided our retirement and home equity under Texas law, and established predictable support and parenting arrangements. I did not try to leave Michael ruined. I wanted the financial reality documented and the ability to build a life he could not threaten by moving money overnight. Margaret told relatives I had chosen a career over marriage. I stopped correcting her. People committed to misunderstanding me did not deserve unlimited evidence. Brooke sent one final email. I believed sitting beside a powerful man gave me status. Now I know a borrowed chair disappears when the wind changes. I read it twice before replying. Build your own. Thomas offered me a permanent role as Senior Director of Enterprise Risk. It was larger than the advisory work and reported directly to the board's risk committee. You have been doing executive-level work without the title for years, he said. The company benefited. We should have noticed sooner. I did not accept immediately. I need 4 weeks. Take them. During that month, I ate breakfast with Sophie before school. I helped Marianne at the bakery several afternoons, mostly organizing vendor contracts because she refused to let me near the delicate pastry dough. I filled the apartment balcony with mint, jasmine, rosemary, and bougainvillea. The apartment did not resemble the house I had spent 15 years perfecting. The kitchen cabinets were ordinary. The balcony faced a parking lot on one side. My desk occupied a corner of the living room. Every object in it felt chosen. One evening, Sophie studied at the breakfast bar while I watered the plants. Do you miss the house? She asked. I thought about the wide staircase, the dining room, and the garden Michael rarely noticed. I remembered birthday mornings and Christmas lights, but I also remembered the way I lowered my voice whenever he entered a room angry. I miss some things, I said. I do not miss who I was there. Sophie closed her textbook. Who were you? Someone who thought keeping peace required becoming smaller. And now? I looked at the notebook stacked on my new desk. I am finding out. At the end of the month, I accepted Meridian Cross's offer. I negotiated the title, compensation, reporting authority, and credit for the frameworks I had created. Thomas did not act offended. He said the questions proved the board had chosen the right person. On my first morning as senior director, I wore an ivory suit with a deep emerald blouse. I walked through the lobby carrying the same leather portfolio I had used before Sophie was born. An assistant met me outside the main boardroom. "Director Carter, we reserved the chair at the head of the table for you." I stopped. The same company. A different table. A version of me I had almost allowed to disappear. The chair was not magical. It could not return 15 years or undo the lessons Sophie had learned by watching me tolerate disrespect. It was wood, leather, and metal. Margaret had been right about that much. But symbols become powerful when people use them to announce who matters. At Michael's promotion dinner, I thought I was defending a place setting. In reality, I was defending the right not to be reduced so another person could look larger. I was defending my name on my work, my voice in my marriage, and my daughter's understanding of what love should require. I sat down. My phone vibrated once. It was Sophie. "Peach pie tonight?" I smiled and replied. "With double cream." Then I placed the phone face down beside my portfolio and looked at the executives waiting for the meeting to begin. "Good morning," I said. "Let us start." No one had to announce who I was. No one had to defend my place. For the first time, my name, my work, and my life were exactly where I had decided to put them.